Hello everybody, my name is Rachel and welcome to my channel Colonati. Today I'm doing a tag for the first time in a really long time. This is the Try a Chapter tag, which I saw on Amanda Center's channel and thought that's an interesting idea for a tag. It was originally created by Malia from Book Paradise, and while I wasn't tagged to do this myself, I think I'm going to tag some people because the whole point of this is to start a whole bunch of books and decide if you want to keep reading them or not. And I think we all need a bit of motivation to start some books that we've been meaning to get to for a really long time. There are only 3 rules for this tag. You pick 5 or more books that you've been meaning to get around to for a long time. You read the first chapter, including the prologue if there is one, from each book, and then you report back about whether yes or no you want to continue reading the book or put it aside for a while. I have actually picked 9 books because I have 5 from my unread shelf that I really want to get to, and I have another 4 from the library that I just picked up and I want to read them soon. So I'm going to do 9 books for this. This may be a very long tag. So I'll quickly show them to you and then I'm going to go read them while my battery recharges because I didn't plan very well for filming today, and then I'll be back to tell you my initial impressions of them. First is Gormenghast by Mervyn Peake. This is the second book in the Gormenghast series. The first book is called Titus Grown, and I read that a long time ago, like 1.5 years ago, I think. And I always meant to get to this book and I never did. I own all the Gormenghast books. So yeah, if you don't know, Mervyn Peake was a contemporary of Tolkien and this book was published in 1950, so I think that means that it technically predates Lord of the Rings. I can't remember the exact publication dates of the Lord of the Rings, but anyway, it's dark, very gothic fantasy, and it's incredibly different from what we think of as fantasy from the Lord of the Rings era. So gonna try this. The Vorrh by Brian Catling, which I don't remember anything about off the top of my head. I just know that I keep saying I'm gonna read it, and I finally bought a copy. It was an impulse purchase, and now I'm gonna start it. Collected Fiction by Hannu Rajaniemi. I pre-ordered this book in hardcover when it came out from Tachyon last year, and I kept saying I was gonna read it, and I never did, so I'm gonna start that now. Because it is a collection of short stories, I'm gonna read the first 2 stories in it because it's only like 25 or 30 pages, which I think is a better chunk than just one story. Thomas the Rhymer by Ellen Kushner, which is the last thing I have to read by Kushner. This book and The City Not Long After by Pat Murphy has been sitting on my bedside table for the last month because I've been intending to get to them for the last month and I still haven't done that, so I'm going to do that now. And then from the library I got some books that I've been looking forward to. The Cold Between by Elizabeth Bonesteel. I just want to say I really like her name, and that might be a part of why I decided to get this. I believe this is a military science fiction novel with kind of a murder mystery plot. I could be really, really wrong about that, but I'm planning on going into this one pretty blind. It's sort of a random pickup from the library. I have Speak by Louisa Hall, and this one and the next one, The House of Shattered Wings, I'm trying to get to now because I was recently talking to Mark about things he was nominating for an award, and these came up on his list, and I was like, those are on my TBR, the library has them, I'm going to read them now. And the last one, the 9th one, is Hild by Nicola Griffith. I read Ammonite by her a little while ago, which is a science fiction novel. This, I believe, is more like historical fiction, maybe with a slight fantasy element. I have a couple of friends who've read it and really enjoyed it and had interesting things to say about it, and now I'm gonna finally read it. This is also a Nebula nominee years ago, before I started BookTube, and I've been meaning to read it ever since then. It's a lot of books. It's really heavy. So, I'll be back through the magic of editing in a very short amount of time to tell you my first impressions of these 9 books. 4 hours, many interruptions later, I am back with a fresh cup of tea and my notes. I'm going to start with Gormenghast because this is the strangest, most difficult book out of this batch, and I don't think I'm going to be reading a ton of it anytime soon, though now that I've started it, I will keep chipping away at it. But I'm reminded so quickly that Peake's writing style is hard to get into, and it takes a lot of brain power, and just overall, this series is weird, odd, dark. It's like a gothic comedy of horrific murders and terrible relationships and a really strange, crumbling castle. I read the introduction by Tad Williams and then the first 3 chapters because that's only 9 pages for the first 3 chapters. The chapters are really, really short sometimes in this. And that first 9 pages is just a brief recap of the situation of the characters, which characters are dead, lost, ghostly, remaining, who all inhabit Gormenghast or its environs, and just the state that we're beginning in. So not a lot happens, but I think that's kind of a snapshot of Gormenghast. The plot is not necessarily something that's happening, like a force happening to the characters. It seems to be more about their personalities and their strange, weird, twisted relationships with each other, including some really deep enmities and things I might call love if the characters weren't so wrong sometimes. I'm going to read you a portion of just the first chapter so you know what the initial impression is like and why this book can be so unusual at times. Titus the 77th, heir to a crumbling summit, to a sea of nettles, to an empire of red rust, to ritual's footprints ankle deep in stone. Gormenghast. Withdrawn and ruinous it broods in umbra, the immemorial masonry, the towers, the tracts. Is all corroding? No. Through an avenue of spires a zephyr floats, a bird whistles, a freshet bears away from a choked river. Deep in a fist of stone a doll's hand wriggles, warm rebellious on the frozen palm. A shadow shifts its length, a spider stirs, and darkness winds between the characters. Yeah, that's gonna take me a little while to get through, and I'm not gonna read that right now. After that deeply weird book is another deeply weird book, the Vorrh. This reads kind of like fantasy historical fiction set in a colonialized Africa that has rebelled, I guess? The first chapter after the prologue begins with a man fashioning a bow out of a dead woman's body. But I think it's okay because I think that's what she actually wanted him to do. And yeah, I was actually really engrossed in this. I didn't want to stop reading because the situation was so interesting, and then like sandwiched in between that bit with the man and the bow, the middle of that chapter is actually like a flashback to when the colonialization started and then how they kind of, the native peoples got rid of them. It really sets an interesting stage. I have no idea what the story's gonna be about, but it was interesting. Then I read the first 2 stories from Hannu Rajaniemi's collected fiction. I took the dust jacket off because I didn't want to crunch it. It has some really beautiful artwork on it. The first story is Deus ex homine, which I think means like the god and the human being, but I don't know Latin, so if you know Latin and you can tell me what that means, comment down below. This first one is about a man who was once like a quantum tech god. He was infected, and there's like this god plague thing that humans are fighting against, and he is no longer a god. He is living with normal people now, but his girlfriend leaves him, goes off to fight the war, and she comes back and they kind of discuss what happened. I could have read a much longer story about that, but frankly, the baby at the end was terrifying, and I don't know if I want to read more about that. The second story, The Server and the Dragon, was much more interesting to me throughout the entire thing. It's this spark of technology, the server, that is gone out into the universe. It reaches a planet, it's warmed by the sun, it starts converting all the matter in the solar system into its thing according to the plan, but it can't do anything for a while. It's waiting for more instructions. It can't do what it actually wants to do, so it starts to create another universe, its baby, its child, and then it runs into a dragon and a message, and that sounds really weird, but I actually really enjoyed it because the whole bit about creating a universe was totally about the stuff I've been reading in Brian Greene's Hidden Reality, and also in Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time, about quantum theory and parallel universes and string theory. That was really interesting, but then it ended, and now I want more. So I will definitely be reading the rest of this collection as quickly as possible because I have gotten a taste of Rajaniemi again and I really enjoy his work. Next, The City Not Long After by Pat Murphy. Frankly, the prologue and first chapter of this, which were both very short, were not really engaging to me. I didn't think I came away with a really strong impression of what the story was going to be about, just that it's set in like a post-apocalyptic, post-plague San Francisco. There are people who live in San Francisco, and 16 years ago, a woman was born. Okay, it's not the most compelling beginning of a book I've read so far, but I really do want to read more of it. So it's gonna go on the maybe pile. I didn't want to stop reading Thomas the Rhymer by Ellen Kushner. I made myself stop at page 24, which there aren't really chapters in this book. There were some very long parts, like maybe 4 or 5 parts for like a 300-page book. So I made myself stop at a logical stopping point, and I really liked it. I thought this was going to be narrated by Thomas, so I was a bit surprised when I realized it was narrated by this normal man named Gavin from like ancient Scotland, and he lives with his wife, and Thomas shows up at their house seeking refuge during a storm. He talks to them, he stays with them for a few days while he recovers from being sick, and he tells them some things, he tells them some stories, and Gavin realizes after he's gone that he's seen him before at a festival or something, and that's as far as I've gotten. But I really like the way that Gavin is narrating it. He's a pretty normal person, and I like how he talks about his wife and how she doesn't put up with some of the stuff that Thomas is telling her, so this is gonna be on my read very quickly pile. Okay, of all of the books that I read, this one has the most interesting beginning, like it starts with an actual bang. All of these have prologues. What's up with so many prologues in these books? But the prologue of this one was the most interesting thing. The first chapter was kind of weird. I'll get to that in a minute. But the prologue is a woman frantically evacuating the rest of her medical staff in a ship right before or during the countdown to blow up another portion of the ship, which is all part of some sort of plan. It's like they really want to do this thing, it's the right decision, and I'm like, why are you blowing this thing up? This seems like a bad idea, but they're really serious about it. So that caught my attention right away. But the first chapter, that's like a time and place and character jump after that, it follows a different woman. She's on like shore leave, R&R from her ship, and she's at a club or a bar with her friend, and people are hitting on her, and then this guy who's a soldier, his pickup line is like literally, you shouldn't keep company with children, like all the men here are boys and he's not, and then they hook up. And I'm like, really? I really want to keep reading because I want to know what's up with that prologue because it was so interesting, and I'm hoping that my first impression of the story, that it jumps straight into people randomly meeting and deciding they want to have sex with each other. Like, that isn't very interesting to me, but I don't know. It's very, it's compelling to read in that way that like Rachel Bach's Fortune's Pawn was, where you just kind of know there's going to be romance in it, but it's such a fun popcorn read. So this is also going to be on my pile of get to very quickly, which I'm gonna be busy. I've got 4 things there already. Next is Speak by Louisa Hall, and I'm frankly confused about this one, and I think I'm gonna put it on the wait a little bit pile. The prologue introduction made no sense to me. It didn't make any sense to me. And the first chapter is a man in prison writing his memoirs. He's in prison for life, I presume for the creation of maybe artificial intelligence bots. And he just introduces himself by telling you how he discovered computers as a child, and then he had his own daughter who had a companion bot, and then it kind of ended there. So I don't know. When I was reading it, I thought it was kind of interesting, but talking about it now, I don't know. I think I'd rather read something from that other pile, so that's not much of an impression, I guess. I'm not so sure I care about somebody writing their memoirs from prison, like deeply regretful or something, but from the table of contents, I think that they're actually different narrators, so I might have to put up with that guy for very long. I know I just took an instantaneous dislike to him, and it's probably not fair, but at this point, I'm glad I have so many extra bookmarks lying around, because I needed 9 of them this morning. The House of Shattered Wings by Aliette de Bodard did not have the most impactful of beginnings, but I am intrigued. An angel falls from heaven or the sky. It is broken and bloody. It's lost its wings. Two characters run off to try to cannibalize it for power, and then another woman shows up, stops them, and is like, hey dude, you're a witch. I want to know more about your intense powers that surprised me. And that's as far as I've gotten in the first chapter. I realize I must sound very flippant, but this is what first impressions are like. Like, I don't know what any of these people are like, or really what they're doing, or any of the world building, or how the world works, so it's kind of hard to be more detailed about it. It was interesting, and I will totally read it probably pretty quickly, but for right now it's kind of in between waiting for later and reading it right away. So yeah, somewhere in the middle there. And finally, Hild by Nicola Griffith. This is definitely the one that I want to put brain power in. It's the denser read that I'm going to put on my read now pile, because I really want to know what's going to happen next about how this little child becomes an influential person or advisor, like at the court of a king, because I think that's what's going to happen with Hild. But the first chapter is about how she's 3 years old, her father dies, this puts her family status in an uncertain area, and her mother takes her from one king's court along with her sister and some other people to go live with another king. There's an impending war between them, and Hild is a very bright, quick child who has an interesting future ahead of her. This will be a slower, denser read for sure, because just the way it's written and the subject matter, it's also a longer book, and it uses a lot of Old Irish, Old English, ancient British terms to describe the world, and I'll have to probably refer to the little glossary in the back quite a bit, which will slow me down. Even though not much happens in that first chapter, it was quite compelling, and I liked the feel of it. So there you go, those are the first impressions of the first chapter or so of 9 different books. And this is an exercise that really makes you compare how different books and in different genres begin stories with vastly different choices about characters, POVs, starting points, those initial scenes. You know, some of them are quite violent, some of them are just very slow, like not much going on here. It just makes you really think about the decisions that the authors made for introducing the story and trying to capture your attention. This was so interesting and such an unusual idea for a tag that really gets you started on reading some books that I am going to tag some people to do this. So I'm going to tag Katie from Effusions of Wit, Claire from Claire Rousseau, Maya from Maya Reads, and Joe from Final Blow Joe to do this. And if you want to do this and I didn't tag you, go right ahead, because it's pretty fun. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and the idea of this, and if you've read any of these or you've just barely started them too and you want to discuss them down below, please comment, and I will talk to you again in my next video. Bye!